So this book that I just read, it's called The Dip. Have you ever heard about The Dip, Ali? It's by Seth Godin. Have you ever come across this book?
I've come across the book. I haven't read it though, but I
Uh,
have come across it. But please enlighten me.
Before I enlighten you, like, are you familiar with the concept of the dip that this book is sort of trying to, expand on?
It's I think it's it talks mostly about the performance dip. Am I right on that?
It's okay. Let me just sort of like explain it to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like how I've understood it. So this author of this book, Seth Godin, he talks about this dip as in like whenever you pursue a project or an endeavor or some goal in life, right? It's never meant to be easy because there will be difficult times, there will be failures, and there will be like issues that you have to deal with. And
Mm-hmm.
so what the author says that, you have this cliff that you start on. That's the euphoria of starting something new, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
when you start a new project and you're like, yes, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to make social media posts. You're so pumped, right? And as you get into it, as time passes, like you have to imagine this as sort of a sine wave, right? You know what a sine wave looks like, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the cliff is the peak of the sine wave, right? That's where euphoria is sort of at its maximum. And that's where you are, I can do this. I have figured out what I need to do in life. But as you spend more time into it, things get challenging and then you start dipping down from this cliff, right? And you
Okay.
come to
Mm-hmm.
this point at the bottom, right? So now we're sort of like the bottom of the sine wave. This is what the author calls the dip, and this is what is considered a make or break moment. Now, what do I mean by the make or break moment? Most people, when they face the dip, what is it that they do? What is it naturally that most people tend to do when they come at a point in their life where they're like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't know how to figure this out. I don't know what to do next. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think? Like, what is your intuition telling you that people tend to do?
I think start questioning. Start questioning everything, right?
That is, yes, that is exactly what it is. They start questioning, right? Now, because most first timers and even sometimes like seasoned experts, right, people who have tried multiple big projects before, when they come to the dip, they're faced with two choices, right? Choice number one is to abandon the project because they cannot figure out what to do. They are
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed. They have no idea what solutions they can implement. Essentially, all motivation has gone, disciplines out the window, and the desire to continue doesn't exist. So you go back to the starting point and then you
Mm-hmm.
start another project. So you find that new euphoria again, and then, you're back in that same cycle all over again. This cycle of getting to the cliff, falling to the dip, going back is essentially what a majority of the people will do for quite a long period of their lives until they figure out that the dip, as I said, is a make or break moment. Now, we've already talked about the break moment. Let's talk about the make moment. So, what does
Mm-hmm.
it mean to, make the moment? The author argues that when you reach this dip, you have this choice of one, accepting that what you have started is not for you, right? Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
let the euphoria decide for you. Maybe you let, the excitement take control of the narrative. You have to be able to question yourself. You have to be able to ask the right questions and then figure out, is it worth persisting, right? People who can figure out if it's worth persisting are the ones that create things that last the test of time, right? And there are many such stories in life where they talk about, is where people have come across the dip, they've lost everything, and they've somehow come out of it and have built an empire. I'm going to give you one crazy example. You're going to love this. And this is a true story, by the way, from one of the biggest companies the world knows. You're familiar with FedEx, right? The delivery
Mm-hmm.
company.
Mm-hmm.
So FedEx, when it started, was doing amazingly well. Like they had periods of struggle, but they were doing amazing. And they were making a lot of money, and the founder was happy. And there comes this point where I think it was economic concerns. And
Mm-hmm.
what had happened was FedEx lost a lot of business. And I'm talking lost so much business that they didn't even have money to pay for fuel for their delivery vehicles and whatnot. So the CEO of the company was faced with a choice. The founder of the company was faced with a choice, like, what do I do next? Now, most businesses would declare bankruptcy. And if you read about it, there is a lot of information out there that says that this is generally what, any sane person or any business advisor or lawyer would tell a business owner to do. File for bankruptcy, and then you can come back and see if there's something to salvage. But you know what this guy did? So he said to himself that this is a temporary moment for me. This is a temporary struggle. Things outside of my control have done some damage, and I need to figure out how to come out of this, right? And this is one of those moments where you come up with some of the most creative or absurd solutions. In FedEx's case, the gentleman came up with one of the most absurd solutions. Do you know what he did? He took the last amount of money that FedEx had in their bank account. He went to Vegas, and then he started gambling with it. He won money. And then he came back with the money, which allowed FedEx to pay for fuel and salaries to weather the storm that they were facing. And look at where the company is now, right? So you see what I'm trying to say here, how the dip works, right? And so I have been exploring the idea of the dip. And I've been trying to figure out, like, how does one recognize that they are in a dip in the first place? Because the most important aspect is to recognize that, you've reached a dip, you don't know what to do next. And that's what really it is all about, finding when you're in the dip. So for me, like, I find that when I am struggling with a project, when I don't know what to do next, that is when I am in a dip. When I start doubting my own skills, when I start doubting my own approach, my own execution, when I, look at my project and I see that only one person has seen it, or 0 people have checked it out today, or, 0 people have shown interest in it, I am in a dip. Because the idea is that I have to persist still, right? Just because I launch something today doesn't mean that success is going to find me tomorrow, right? There is no guarantee of that. But I still have to make it to tomorrow. And so does my project, which means that I have to be able to find ways to continue pushing tomorrow, day after, until that time comes when I have come out of the dip. And these dips can last anywhere from weeks to years, right? It's really a matter of recognizing when, how much you're willing to do, how much you're willing to push, and how far you are willing to go to succeed. There is this line, this quote that the person says regarding the dip, and I'm going to read it to you. If it doesn't cost you your life, it isn't a quest. When I say this sort of quote to you, what rings in your head? Let me just get your thoughts on that quote first.
Man, just because 2-3 words are common with another quote that I know, and I think completely fits with that, is that the only thing certain in life is death. Everything else is uncertain and is to a point that it's doable.
Yeah.
The only psychological thing certain in life is death. Everything else you can figure out. That's what I'm trying to come at it as, like, dip, right? There is always a solution. If it's not to excel, but it's always a solution to. There's always a move. Right? There's always a move to make it better, to make it extraordinary, to make it the best, which whatever it might be. There is always a move to make. Quitting is never the move. That's not the move. Like quitting, like people say, hey, I quit, as if the quit is also a move. But no, quit is not the move in this scenario, in my mind, at least. And just to kind of extend on to what you said, Noman, when you were talking about the dip, I was, first off, I agree every single part of it, that out of every hardship comes out an extraordinary thought or a concept or an action. That's where people actually, or else why would you, right? So this why would you is what stuck in my mind with that conversation. And I was thinking that I had a little bit sudden self-reflection, kind of, and that actually really helped me kind of right now. So I think I should really share this with you. When on one of the business ventures, there was a website, or there were websites, or let me say, there was a website that I looked up to. Okay? Uh, that website, I think, has not made any change. That website existed a few years before me, before I got into the similar uh, sector. Okay, and that was a website that I looked up to. Okay, uh, it's been, let's say, it's been 5 years or so. I haven't seen any. I know that website is still very popular, still does really good, but I haven't seen any changes on that forum whatsoever. Okay, to a point, I believe with my numbers and all, I have surpassed him. The reason, in my mind, the reason was all the dips that I saw and the dips that I see today. His system works perfect. Nobody's messing with it anymore.
Right.
It works. It just works seamless, right? And the growth has become pretty stagnant and pretty what do you call it? Expected or plateaued or predicted, right? This is what it is, right? But at the same time, I think I might have touched that. I might have gone through the dip phase where I was like, man, then I introduced something newer. Then I tried to solve it a different way. I saw what they had done, what they had not done.
Right.
Sometimes I also feel that a no dip also causes issues. Dip is so important. If there is no dip, then there's no need to change, or no need to grow, or no need to excel, or no need to challenge the norm, or no need to come up with newer ways or better ways to do it, because comfort, which is the biggest enemy for any entrepreneur or any
Venture,
venture, right? So I feel that that's the importance of a dip. That not constant, but once in a while you get challenged hard enough to make those leaps, big leaps.
Yeah, absolutely,
Dips
yes.
cause the big leaps. Every day, how do I solve this? Then you start thinking outside the box, right? Then you start breaking all the assumptions that you had about a certain scenario, just because you need to make it work regardless, right? So sorry, when you were talking about dips, of course I was listening and I was thinking, but at the same time something was clicking in my mind. I was like, man, what if there were no dips? That's so
Yeah.
right. That's the issue too.
It's actually such a big issue. Just sort of to really drive home this point that you have made, Ali, because you made a very important point, right? Specifically about comfort, right? Comfort breeds complacency, right? That's one of the biggest problems with comfort, is that once you become complacent, you stop innovating. Now, I'm gonna give you an example. Okay. And I think you will really connect with this one. I genuinely feel, because you and I are around the same ages, same sort of like upbringing style. You remember Nokia, the phone company, right? When we were kids, Nokia was basically the coolest thing any child could have, right? Like, man, I used to scream and beg for a Nokia phone. I wanted one. It wasn't even about being cool. It's just, it was such an amazing device, right?
Nokia 3310. That's
3310. That's
I
the
still
big
remember
neck.
the number. That's how how
Yes.
ingrained it is, right?
Yep. Yes. And I had a Nokia too, right? And I was always fascinated by how innovative these people were. Well, and I was a child back then. I didn't understand much about technology, but I was so fascinated by it. And I remember telling my dad that, like, these guys are so smart. I want to be like them one day. And obviously, he'd encourage me. He's like, well, keep studying, keep reading about it. And I followed this company for many years. And I remember the day Apple announced the iPhone, right? They came out swinging. Apple did not hold back. And I was just like, Nokia is probably cooking something in their labs. Just give it a couple of months. They're going to come out and they will shut Apple down. That was what was going through my head, because it was Nokia. They invented the phone, basically, right? The world was using Nokia. And that never happened. Nokia basically faded away into obscurity, and then it was bought by a Chinese company, and now Nokia is nothing, right? They just stick to they've moved from consumer to the commercial market. many years later, I remembered I reading about Nokia, like what happened. So I wanted to know the history, right? Why did a company that essentially invented modern communication just sort of disappear? How does that even happen? And this is where it gets interesting. The engineers at Nokia, right? They invented the iPhone before Steve Jobs even thought about the iPhone. And it had everything that the iPhone had. It had an app store, it had a big screen, touch screen, you could use your fingers, you could, you had cameras, and then what happened was essentially they presented it to their management team, right? The Nokia management team. And this is recorded that this is what was said. The management team said that they don't see Apple as a threat. They don't, sorry, not that they said that they don't see Apple as a threat, that they don't see the value of this product because we already have what is working and it is selling and it has no competition. So why should we, reinvent the wheel, so to speak? And one of the engineers, again, you have to take some of my words with a grain of salt because this is maybe second, third hand information. But one of the engineers said that we are in a state where Nokia is now in a dip and no one has recognized it, right? But management did not believe. The engineer management said, they basically shelved the project and then they said, we'll just stick to what we do. And then Apple comes out, they've done the innovation, they've, basically captured the market and they wiped out everybody from the market. And Nokia tried to re-enter the market. Nokia did everything it could. Nokia even partnered with Microsoft, right? Like they decided, Apple's biggest enemy is Microsoft. So let's go talk to Microsoft. Microsoft was like, yo, we'll do whatever you want. Like Nokia, it never worked. Apple just wiped them off the face of the earth, essentially. And it all happened because the management team at Nokia had become so comfortable with their success, so complacent with it, that they had become blind to how the rest of the market was evolving. They had essentially formed an echo chamber. And they were like, yeah, we're the winners, we're the champions, we're the kings. No one is better than us. Who is going to compete with Nokia? Without ever realizing that they weren't looking down, they were looking up. And everybody else was already looking down on them. The engineers saw that, but management did not, and that was the end of Nokia. So that was, their story of the dip. It's such a, for me, it's such an important and it's really, for me, it's one of the most important life lessons about, when you're starting a business, running a business, or even when you're attempting any project or endeavor. I always ask myself, am I looking down or am I looking up? Right? Because it helps me put into perspective where I am in that line from A to B. Okay? Because, it's really A is your starting point, B is your ending point, or whatever it is, your goal. And it's not a straight line. It's up and down and left and right and, circles and whatnot, and then you get to B, right? But you have to recognize where you are on that line. And I frequently ask myself this question. And one of the things that I have learned over the years, Ali, about the dip, it's not a big book, by the way. This dip book is less than, I think it's around 50, 60 pages, 70 pages, but it's also a smaller book. Like it's like, half the size of those full-length books. So it's even a short book and you could read it in like 20, 30 minutes, no big deal. And I've read it many, many times over the years. And I keep coming back to this point that I have to constantly ask myself two questions. One, do I have the willpower and the energy to push through this dip? Do I want to see this to the finish line? Or the second question is my approach wrong? Should I go back to the starting point and try a different approach? Right? Just because you're in the dip doesn't mean that you have to slog and push through to get to a finish line. Like we cannot force success, right? You have to make sure that at least, some of the path you're walking on is the right path. You will make mistakes along the way, yes, but you have to course correct. And a lot of people, when they find themselves in the dip, they tend to either stagnate and get stuck in there without moving forward, or they just quit and never revisit the problem again. right? And if I was to ask you just, to get your thought on the idea of being in a position where you're working on a project and you've come to your lowest low, right? That euphoria has now completely dissipated and you are at that position, your project is out there, right?
Mhm.
And I know you and I had this conversation because I called you before I launched my project and I specifically asked you a question about this. And yeah, and I asked you, when you launched your project, how many people were coming to you? How did you persist day after day, right? Because it can get really disheartening when you see zero visitors or zero sales or even
Mhm.
just one visitor. You're like, have I done a bad job? Why don't people like this? Right? So Ali, why don't you recall that little conversation we had,
Of
and
course, of course.
why don't you just sort of like share what you had to say back then to me about like how you persisted?
It's and I'm glad you bring this you're bringing this topic back up again. It's I think even after that, subconsciously, unconsciously, I think I've been thinking about my response to that, right? Like response being the same, but just the wordings and the delivery of it, right? There's one thing that I've understood over time is that just trying, just just doing, just trying harder is not the way. Just to keep trying harder and harder, and then keep doing the same thing over and over again, and doing more of it is not the solution at times, or not the solution. I would say most of the times. The point, a really good example comes to mind, Oman, is that kind of helps me reflect onto the book that I had in mind. It's called You Too, and it's by Price Pritchard. You with a exponential two on the top. That's the name of
Okay.
the.
Okay.
The book is just to kind of give you a little bit of reference and how it ties into what I'm going to present to you. Is the book kind of talks about the it's about the concept of exponential gains, an explosion in performance, multiplying instead of addition, and maybe also understanding that working hard is not always the way to go about it. Okay, so the point being, and in there's a really good example. He talks about a bee. Okay, a bee is uh, a bee enters a room, the window, and now it's trying to find its way back out. Okay, the bee is constantly hitting the glass window. Okay, once, twice, three times, four, continuously. You can visualize how bee does, right? Just keep hitting the
Absolutely. Yeah.
right, trying to get out, trying to get out, trying to get till the point it loses all its energy, right? It falls down and then it dies. Not realizing that if it would have just flown 10, like 10 wing space or 10 steps or whatever, you know, that side, the window was open. She could have exited. But she kept hitting her head at the same part over and over again, thinking that if I work harder, if I use more force, I will be able to get through. Not understanding that it only required a little bit change of strategy, a little bit change of thought, a little bit change of perception, and a little bit a different kind of effort. Okay. So the
Uh-huh.
point being that with what you said, how disheartening. So this is what I was doing first, right? I was like, man, my I'm gonna keep posting
Uh-huh.
similar type because okay, no visitors come in. I did not change my strategy for a very long time. I kept doing those things, but I kept doing it harder. Oh, maybe this word instead of that word. Maybe this sentence instead of that sentence. Maybe this time instead of that time, right? Till the point I was like, man, whatever I do, it's not working. And then of course at that time, I was an avid reader at that time, right? Then coming across the biggest statement that I still live by today, and I know you've heard this so many times from me that Ali, nothing changes if nothing changes, right? So I was like, man, something needs to change. Okay,
Yeah.
something needs to change. Why not try it this way? Then try, didn't work. Tried something else, try, something worked. So I put it in my pocket. I was like, okay, this worked. And then after a year or year and a half, uh, let's say 10. I had 10 things that worked at very different scales. Okay. Some had small results, some had no results, and some had big results. But me being me, I was still of the mentality that Ali, working harder, working harder, working harder, right? Trying to like the same B. I'm still the same B at start, because now I have 10 things with me, and now I want to do all 10. Okay, burning out, doing all 10, even though all the 10 have different levels of results, or different levels of of return. Let's say the word return.
Yeah. Right.
And then I was like, man, wouldn't it be smarter if I was just to focus on the ones that have the biggest returns,
Absolutely.
right?
Wouldn't it? Yeah.
Because the mind is such, right? You just want to do everything for your business, right? You just want to do everything that you can, right? And you're so passionate that you become blind a bit, right?
Yeah.
And then,
Absolutely.
and then, uh, and then I'm just going to bring about the point that a very important point that I've been exploring till today. I think I explored it before, but I have a better understanding of it today. That and I know you've asked me a question, but I just want to pose a question to you as well.
Sure. Yeah.
That Noman, what in this scenario, you know what's habitual thinking, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then you know what's experience,
Absolutely.
right? If I was to ask you, and sometimes, just with the right question comes the right understanding of things, right?
Right.
So if I was to ask you, what is the difference between habitual thinking and an experience, Noman?
Habitual thinking is
Mhm.
resorting to what you already know. Experience is updating what you know.
Okay. And then what is experience?
Experience is attempts at
Okay.
or an execution towards a goal or a vision. For me.
Okay. Okay. No, and that's good, right? Like when reading this book,
Mhm.
and when reading other books as well, even The Power of Now and things like that,
Right.
and even The Power of Habit. At one point in time, I was reading this idea. I was like, man, this concept of habitual thinking. Then what is the difference between habitual thinking and experience? Because experience is also what is like a good habit is also an experience. Like when people say, man, I'm experienced,
Right.
right? They say that just because you have a habit of doing a thing a certain way, in that sense, right? You experienced it so many times before that you know how to do it best now, in that sense, right? But then
Right.
I kind of thought about it a little bit, and this is how I thought about it. That experiences allow you to respond the best way, taking the present differences into consideration. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas habitual thinking is using some lesson again and again, even though the situation is different,
Right.
right? And I feel this is what I was doing. I was applying the same strategy to a
Mhm.
to a thing in the present, even though there were some changes in the present. And then I was like, man, Ali, experience. What is experience? Experience is knowing, having the know-how, but having the capacity to understand that this situation is slightly different, so I still need to adapt just a bit or a lot, right?
Right.
So this idea of adaptation was the difference between habit and experience for
Right.
me. Does that make sense, Naman?
I see how you approach this. I see how you're approaching habitual thinking and experience, right? For me, like
Mm-hmm.
I see your point too. I think I
Mm-hmm.
should point out first that I see your point too, and I like the point about looking at the present conditions and sort of like adjusting based on that, and I understand that, right? I also feel that in the context of this, just as sort of
Mm-hmm.
what you have discussed, right? Experience in itself is not something that is universal, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because your experience is going to be different from mine. So what you learn from your experiences within that present context is going to be different from what I learn from my experiences within that present context. And I think that comes down to, your individuality, the way you process information, and whatever other gifts that each individual has, right? And uh, I think it's really asking the question that how well can you apply and how well can you adapt what is happening at that moment,
True, true.
right?
The
I
aware
Yeah,
the awareness of that, the awareness of the situation, and
right.
even and kind of connecting to what you had asked me before that, Ali, what did I do when I had zero visitors for months? At not even months at Noman, for like a good year. I
Yeah,
told you at
yeah.
that point in time it was 10 to 30 cents a day earning
No,
from the
that's
website, like
exactly
a year,
why I
right?
asked you that question that day.
So so it was, and I learned it the hard way, to be honest
Hmm.
with you. I didn't have any mentorship with me. I didn't have any books to guide me. It was only an obsession at that point in time. I was only driven by the idea of not failing, right?
Yeah,
It wasn't even, I wasn't even driven by success. I was just driven by the idea of not failing. I was like, no, 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 no. This way, that way. I gotta like, because it takes a toll on you, right? After
it
seeing
does.
all
It
those,
does.
right? But then over time, I saw that okay, now. Let me just put it into perspective, okay? Naman, from making shorts to YouTube videos to doing vlogs uh, uh, to uh, to to tweeting to Facebook posts to LinkedIn posts to doing all of these things at the same time in a specific order for such a long time. Uh, it's honestly cold calling, cold emails, randomly commenting on every second, third video to bring my website up. I tried everything under the sun, everything under the sun that you could think of, or what I googled could be done, right? I did, I
Hmm.
did. Some
Hmm.
some things for a very lengthy time, some things for a very short time, and
Right,
then those things gave me data,
right.
right? I started seeing, I was like, okay. And then it's like, and I'll be very honest with you, it's very hard for me to exactly pinpoint which, like some of them I know were completely did not work. Like for me, I'll be honest, blogging did not work at all,
Right,
just at all. I was trying to blog at Medium, right?
right.
I for me, I have no idea what comment might have worked, what small video that I made had worked, what it's hard to pinpoint, but I know that just putting myself out there continuously, and then I told you, I got the first YouTube review by somebody else on my website. That that and then that's where I saw the very first results. I was like, huh. When other people are speaking about me, seems to get more traffic. Okay, is there
Yeah.
something in it, right? And then to a point that and then I was like, okay, so now I need to support this person, this stranger has supported me. Because honestly, this is one thing that I learned too, that a lot of your success comes from strangers, not from the people that you know. I'll be honest
That's
with you.
true.
I remember, and this is no diss against family or friends. Or so I know I do the same when I'm the same. Like now I try to do different when people tell me they have this business or this venture. But at that point in
Yeah,
time, I was the same guy that somebody would tell me something, I wouldn't even go and make an effort to go like my friend's business, right? I was just like, because I was so, and not that I was hating, I was just so involved with my own thing, not understanding
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
like this is how it should work, man. Like I should be the first one to give them a tap at the back. It has to be. Why not, right? Because this is how, uh, like, because it does something for me too. But sorry, just to come back to the point that I was like, okay, so if some stranger has supported me, I'm
I
gonna show
Yeah.
support to them.